connect up as high as we can, because she said part of it is when we die, we want to keep our souls going up, 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 and you don't want to get caught. And even if you see relatives or you see something, keep going as high as you can, and then you can come back. But I thought that was fascinating.
During death, she's talking about that?
Yeah. Like once you pass, that as you start to move towards the light, that you just keep going up as high as you can. And
Really?
that was just what she was teaching us. Like that was part of the practice, is how high up in your column you can connect.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome back. It is hotter than hell where I'm at. And funny enough, that's what we're going to be talking about today with my good friend Stephanie James. We talk about the dying process and what one may experience when they die, whether or not we actually experience heaven or hell when we pass over, or is it a product of our belief systems? Also, she gives us one technique that we can implement when we are in that process of dying so that we can transcend that reincarnation cycle, so we don't have to keep coming back in life after life after life after life to experience whatever it is that we're supposed to experience, but we never remember. So I want to hear from you. I want to know what your thoughts are on this conversation. Make sure to hit subscribe. Leave me a comment. What are your thoughts? Do you think that your belief systems create the reality after you die, or do you think it's an actual dimension in which you experience separate of your own consciousness? Stephanie, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today on this platform. I always enjoy our conversations. I feel like we go pretty deep and talk about different subjects, existential situations, crises, and or even death. So I'm excited to be able to share this space.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just honored to be here. Happy to be with you again.
So how have you been since our last conversation a couple of years ago? Like, what have you been up to?
I would say that, the biggest things have been, I had a big move to Santa Fe, which is a big life move from Colorado, where family, friends, I grew up there and got a big call. Literally, I say I didn't make a decision. It was a directive, and literally got the hit. I hadn't had anything like this in 32 years. And it said, "You're moving to Santa Fe." And
So the
so
call from whom?
from the divine,
Oh,
absolutely. Yeah, it was not. I was literally in the middle of a therapy session. I'm a psychotherapist, and got the hit, and I had not had it in 32 years. And so when it happened before, it was life changing. And it was literally in the middle of a weekend with a bunch of friends up at Vail skiing, and I'm getting ready to go to bed. And I'd lived in Denver at the time, and the hit was like, "You need to move back to Fort Collins." And it was just that strong, that direct. And I was like, okay. I mean, it actually made me, I started tearing up. And my friend I was sharing the room with, she's like, what's up? And I said, I don't know, but it's so strong. I've got to go. It's so
mm.
strong. So, and I'm not a big date rememberer, but I will always remember this, because it was the next morning, Sunday was January 14th. And I'm literally up here in Vail at my aunt's home that had 6 bedrooms and sleeps 14 people comfortably, packed, like having like one of those weekends you're always going to remember. So there was no reason that I would have been sad or thinking of leaving. And so the next morning, I called my mom and I said, "Mom, my lease is up February 1st." So I had 2 weeks. And I said, "So I'm going to go in tomorrow and give my 2 weeks notice." And it's just that strong. I didn't have a job in Fort Collins at the time. I was the only person. It's before I went to grad school, but I was the only person that was not mastered level on the therapy team. So I had this awesome job. I worked with my friends. Things were great. And so I just said, it's just that strong. I got to come home. I was a single mom with a 4-year-old. So long story short, I do. I go in on Monday, give my 2 weeks notice, pack up my stuff, because in that phone call to my mom, she said they have several rentals. And she said, well, interestingly, one of our renters isn't renewing his lease that's up February 1st.
Mm.
So I had a place to stay. That's all I needed. So I go home within literally a few days. I have a job. But here's the thing, Trey, that was so wild is 3 weeks to the day that I moved back to Fort Collins, the adolescent unit that I worked on was shut down. All my girlfriends were laid off, and it was never to reopen under that hospital name. And like the front page of the Rocky Mountain News said, psychiatric abuses charged. And unbeknownst to us, there were scouts during that time. This is before managed healthcare. And they would go out and find kids to bring into treatment, this residential lockdown treatment. And then we'd just keep them. We didn't know this, of course, 7 to 9 months till their insurance ran out. And then these scouts would get a $5,000 kickback per kid.
Wow.
And totally illegal. And the reality is, I would have been a single mom, just signed a lease, no job. I mean, yes, I could have taken care of myself, but man, would it have been like crisis. I mean, at the time I was living paycheck to paycheck. I think it just would have been super stressful. And instead, when that hit came through, I was like, okay, I'm following that. And I did. And so it was just this beautiful, smooth transition. And when I got the hit again, 32 years later, to come here to Santa Fe, I was like, yeah, I'm doing that. And everything lined up. Everything's been so beautiful for the transition. I already had a community of friends here. It's been
Hmm.
incredible. So I would say that's one of the biggest things since I saw you.
Yeah. So how do you interpret that hit, right? Like, how do you experience it as a knowing, a voice? Like, what does that look like?
It's like an internal voice for sure. And it when I say it's a hit, it's something that's very clear on the inside. And I'm very clear it's not me. It's not my thoughts. As I said, I'm in the middle of a session. And so that's one of the things I, I don't want to say pride myself on, but is like really important to me is to be really present with who I'm with. So I'm totally focused on what my client was saying. And it was almost as if time took on like this interesting things just kind of went like, this very interesting state of time at the moment. And I was finding myself like it's giving me the chills right now, struggling to pull back in,
Hmm.
because it was just like that clear. And so I let it go. And that night I called, my daughters, and right away, everybody was just like, oh my God, mom, I'm so excited for you. Like, yeah, you totally need to do this. And my brother, who I hadn't talked to for a long time, called that same night and said, Steph, this is it. Like, this is exactly he got it. Like, this is what you're supposed to be doing. And I love this for you. So, I mean, right from the get go, it was like, go, go, go. I'll tell you one of the synchronicities or the signs, I guess, too, that it was just like green light was, my office I was leasing. I still had a lease until June 24th. And I called the property manager and I said, hey, I'm moving to Santa Fe. And it was like the very first thing out of her mouth was, oh, I'm so excited for you. She's like, that's great. And then she said, okay, well, we'll just consider this your 30 days. And, the 10th of March, I'll send you back your deposit. Like, unheard of, just
Wow.
total positivity, totally like the universe was going, yep, go, go, go.
That's so interesting because you and I have spoken before about like agency, like when you get a nudge from the universe or a hit or an intuitive download, like what does that say about free will or agency or self efficacy? Like
No,
what's
I
the,
hear you.
what's the difference?
Well, we do have free will, right? We always have free will. We can ignore the nudge. I used to laugh when Oprah Winfrey used to talk about it, like when the divine would speak, she says a lot of times it comes as a whisper. And then if you don't listen, it speaks a little louder. And then pretty soon it's a brick to the head. We can choose not to pay attention to those hits. And I think, it's like the other big thing is I know, we're going to talk about, which is my new book, Your Big Fat Juicy Life and everything after. When that all came through, it was a conversation with Neil Donald Walsh. I was interviewing him for my show, and we just couldn't get to the interview. We were just, it was recorded, so we're just talking, 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 and then you can see it on the recording, on the video. He gets a download, and all of a sudden he's like, Stephanie, you're going to write a new book, and you're going to start tomorrow morning, and this book's going to
Wow.
have a global impact, and I'm going to endorse this book.
Hmm.
I mean, this is, and I woke up the next morning and started writing this book. And my first two books took 9 months each. It was like gestating a child, gestating a baby coming into the world. I wrote this book in under 6 weeks. It was just direct flow. And then the people that started coming out of the woodwork to be a part of it, like Wayne Dyer's daughter and his wife, Ariel Ford, um, Stephen Simon, who's the Academy Award winning producer of What Dreams May Come. It was just, Suzanne Giesman, who's, world
Hmm.
renowned medium. So, yeah, I mean, I think we have to listen to those. We don't have to if we choose to. I guess, again, we do have free will. But for me, I have learned that when those hits and when those synchronicities show up, that's really the universe's, GPS leading me to the next place I need to be.
I love that. Yeah. I think that the issue is discerning, like you said, there's this voice or this thought that's outside of yourself. I don't know if I've ever experienced that because I don't know, sometimes I feel like my thoughts aren't my own anyway, because we so self-identify with the thoughts that we're having. So to have a different thought that doesn't feel like yours, to me, I don't know if maybe I experience it on a daily basis. Maybe I can't discern those types of thoughts from the thoughts that are running all the time, congruent with my experience in life, because there is positive and negative ones, I guess. And
Hmm.
now that you talk about this, I wonder like how many times in my life I've ignored those intuitive hits because I just thought that was a thought, you know?
Totally. And I guess I want to also, clarify. It's not like I get this big deep voice from the sky that comes in and is like, "Stephanie, you need to do this." It's totally like this just internal voice, although it's distinct from, for me, when it happens, it's like it's more like guidance. Like it's like your higher self. When we're in touch with that, it's that internal spark within us, right? And it's that divine spark that is comes through us and is us. And I think as we tune into that, maybe we start noticing those messages. We
Mhm.
start going like, oh, okay, like that isn't just my thought. This has a different texture or quality.
Yeah. Well, it's so cool that you have your passes um, of the psychotherapy, experience and profession, because as you grow spiritually, who do you identify more with, the Stephanie James author or that divine spark? Right? What would the psychotherapist? I think I kind of know what the psychotherapist answer would be, but as you move forward, who do you or what do you identify more so as Stephanie James?
Wow, that's such a great question. Um, because it's interesting. I do feel like the as my life has gone on, I do identify more with that. To me, I kind of identify it as a little girl in some ways because it's that really pure, effervescent, but it really is, it's our spark, right? I mean, it's that part of us that it can never be extinguished, no matter what our life circumstances are, no matter what difficulties we've been through. It's inherently this gorgeous part of who we are. Again, it's like that divine spark. So, um, I guess I don't even think about identifying myself, to be honest. I think that what I keep trying to do is I think of myself as like a conduit, right? For as much light and love to come through me as possible. And so I feel like my work is to notice when a cobweb gets away. I mean, gets in the way, right? So like if there's a trigger, if there's pain, if there's whatever it is, it's not ignoring it. It's not like life is always blissful and joy. I think that's bullshit. I don't think that that's real. I feel like it's really noticing that flow and what gets in the way of it. So I
Mm.
guess that would be kind of more how I would identify with an energy, if you will.
Sure. Well, the more that I talk or learn about self-transcendence, I had mentioned that I was researching some of Maslow's work, and his last, I guess, i- in the pyramid, the conventional pyramid has self-actualization at the top, but then there's also a missing piece called self-transcendence, where you start, moving away from the self and more towards, I guess, and I guess an embodiment of the interconnectedness of all. And to me, that's fascinating because it's like, all right, so if I start to surrender the ego more to a higher consciousness, like how do I live through this life, this reality, day in and day out? Like, what does that look like? Is it, how do I make decisions as Trey? And then also this embodiment of a collective consciousness possibility, or whatever that looks like. So it's just interesting to me as we grow through this journey in spirituality, the more that I feel like the old persona of Trey is slowly, kind of, I don't want to say dying, but dying essentially. And there's an evolution of a newer awareness of interconnectivity to everything, to all of life. And you talk about death in your book, your new book, and which is fascinating to me because I feel like we're all afraid of that. I mean, the ego, I mean, even like animals too, fear death. You can see when you back a dog into a corner how it reacts and wants to fight for its life. You can see people on their deathbeds, like just scared to death and nervous about what is around the corner. And your book talks about the death process, some of the evidence of past lives or a remembrance of a past life, and kind of moving through that. That's why I love hospice work so much. Just learning and reading about that, because a lot of the patients that go through that often have visitations from loved ones during their process or during their transition, which um, is evidence for me anyway, maybe not for the scientific community, but for me, that our consciousness survives our body. um, what are your thoughts on all of that? I'm trying to formulate a question from that, but like, you talk about death directly in your book and have examples of your own evidence. So I just want to know, like maybe speak to some of the evidence in the book, right? Like
Sure.
your
Yeah.
younger experiences to where you with your grandmother, about how you had an experience with her through your daughter, which was fascinating
Yeah.
to me. If you want to speak to
Yeah.
that.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you're saying, and it's really beautiful. And I think that is part of our journey, is to let, and the ego isn't just like, oh, I'm so incredible. It's not just about letting that ego dissolve. It's also about letting the small self ego, where, oh, I'm not enough, the part where it's our wounded self that keeps coming up. And I think, as we continue to do the work, the spiritual work of being in touch with that divine within us, and that seeing that divine spark in everything around us, every sentient being. It's actually, it's in the rocks, it's in the, I'm looking outside right now, this gorgeous, day, this, it's in the sky, it's in the trees, it's in, so it's recognizing that each one of us are golden threads in the fabric of humanity, like we're all essential golden threads. And that said, yeah, I think the book, I always say, it's not a book about death, it's a book about life, death, and that death isn't the end. That's why it says your big fat juicy life, and then in quote, in these little parentheses, and everything after, because death isn't the end, it's just the next chapter in our book of eternity. And, I had evidence of that really young. And like you said, and I think one of the poignant stories in the book, which to me, though, was like, you have those life experiences that break the lids off of your belief system, and then you can never go back the other way. And for me, it was when my little girl was 4 years old. I was 25. And I always laugh because this was back in the days before cell phones, just to date myself here. And I was in the bathtub talking to my mom on this big, one of those big portable phones. And she was just letting me know that my 46-year-old aunt, who had been struggling with breast cancer, had a mastectomy, but it had spread throughout her body. And that day, she had gone in for exploratory surgery, and they found out that was just all over her body. So they said, we can't remove any of this. They literally just sewed her up. And my mom was telling me, they're saying she's got maybe 3 months to live. So I get off the phone and I'm just crying. I'm just so sad thinking about this. And little Acacia, that's my daughter, wanders in. And I always think it's interesting to note for people that acacia is actually the Greek word for immortality. And, it's the tree of life in Africa. And so I had no idea that she was going to be my teacher about immortality when I named her that. And so she comes into the bathroom and she just sits on the side of the tub and she's looking at me and she's like, "What's wrong, mama?" And I said, "Oh, sweetheart, mama just doesn't want anyone to die." And she just looks at me, she's looking at me right in my eyes in this little wise voice. And she's like, "But mama, we never die." And then I'm thinking, okay, she's thinking like we go to heaven, even though we didn't go to church or talk about heaven, and I said, "Oh, yeah, honey, we go to heaven." And then she just looks at me and just kind of shakes her head. She's like, "Mama, there's no heaven." She said, "When I was a light up in the sky with God." And then she pauses and she says, "Do you remember your other mother, Dorothy?" And I'm like, "Oh my God, like my other mother, Dorothy, that was my grandmother who died when I was 13." And my grandfather had remarried a year later. So the only person Acacia knew, I didn't have any pictures of my grandmother. Here I am 12 years later. I just didn't have pictures of her. We didn't talk about her. Acacia only knew Grandma Seal. And she says, "Yeah, do you remember your other mother, Dorothy?" She said, "Well, her light was up in the sky with me and God. And then God put some of her light in me, and I got to come down and be your daughter."
Wow.
And I mean, it was just like, and I called my mom because it's my mom's mom. And I mean, we were just like sobbing. And then I have to say one other like evidence of proof of that, which I thought was fascinating, is by the time Acacia was about 12 years old, and we didn't say anything to my grandpa because we're like, "Oh my God, he's going to think we're nuts. He's just not, he's very old school. We're not going to say this to him." And interestingly, at 12 years old, we're all sitting around the table. My grandfather had 26 grandkids. I mean, there's a ton of people here for a holiday. And here's Acacia. And even as a young girl, Acacia was more timid, shy, a little bit of an introvert. She's an artist. She's just this lovely, incredible, beautiful being, but not the personality at all of my grandmother. Like, I have the personality of my grandmother, like don't know a stranger,
Hmm.
very gregarious. Um, and so it was so interesting because we're all sitting there talking. And then my grandfather, like for the first time, says to all of us, he's like, "Out of all my grandkids," he said, "Acacia reminds me the most of Dorothy." And we're all
Wow.
just like, whoa, it's giving me the chills again just to think about that. It's like he saw that light in her because my grandmother was, one of the loves of his life. Um, so anyway, so that was just for me, just further evidence that there's something beyond this 3D reality that we're experiencing, and that
Mhm.
that light, our souls continue.
Yeah, I wonder. You talk a little bit about quantum physics. I always wonder, like, what is it like non-local memory? Like, how is it? Because when we come here, we have these blinders almost like this amnesia of everything that we've ever been.
Mhm.
And people, I've heard arguments like this place is a school for learning, and then people have argued, well, if it's a school, why don't I remember fourth grade? Why do I have to come back in here with a fresh, new, wiped memory every time? What are your thoughts on that? Right, like if memory is non-local, when you die, when you pass, I wonder if we like when we expand back, when our light leaves this reality and goes back to wherever it comes from. Like I wonder if we remember all of our past lives. I wonder if we the purpose of being here, like is it does the ego create purpose for ourselves, or is there like an overall arching purpose that when we come into here, is it to make change, is it to create create a more loving environment? I always wonder this because if we can't remember our past lives, if we're actually a clean slate every time we come in here, like what is the purpose of that?
Yeah, God, I hear you. That's such a deep question. I wish I just could say, "Well, here's the answer, Trey."
Yeah,
But
sure. I thought you had
um,
you got all the answers,
yeah,
right? You're a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
psychotherapist.
Right, right, right. But I do think what's fascinating is that we do have these little, almost like bleed throughs in consciousness. And I write about it in the book that I've in my life I've had, 3 or 4 experiences where I've had an incredibly vivid dream that is so real and so beyond anything I've experienced in dream time that it's like and I would have the hit as I was dreaming it, like a secondary consciousness going like, this is how you died. This is how you went out
Really?
last time, or, oh yeah, I share in there, um, one of the, and it was like very, very vivid. I mean, here it is probably 15, 20 years later. And I remember this dream, like it's a memory is what it feels like. It doesn't feel like a dream. It's very crisp. I can grab onto it. And, in that particular dream that I'm speaking of, I'm like being led down this path, like, and I'm wearing just like a gauze kind of gown with a sash, very, um I can't really even tell you, Middle East maybe somewhere, but I'm being drugged down to this river, by these two guys. Like I've done something wrong. My sense was I was saying things that I shouldn't have been saying. I was like speaking out and sharing whatever information. And so these two guys drag me down to the reeds, and then they're holding me under the water. They're drowning me. And so I have that whole experience of drowning, and then excuse me, and then again that secondary consciousness that kind of comes in as like, wow, like you're dying. This is like you're witnessing this death. And then I laugh. I write about it in the book because then, um, one of the guys puts his head underwater to make sure that I've stopped breathing, like there's no more bubbles coming up. And then like my last act of defiance, my last act of any energy in my body, I just open my eyes and look at him, and I just see him like screaming and all the bubbles leaving his mouth, and that's it. And
Oh,
then,
wow.
it's over. But what's interesting, and I guess what I want to share with you, I share in the book, one of my dear friends, Stevie, he did hypno-regressive therapy and experienced, and it's something that people can do now and experience. He said, I experienced 3 particular past lives. And in the end, he said, even if those weren't real, quote unquote real, they informed so much and made so much sense to him why he is who he is today.
Hmm.
And I could even say that, that's a little bit true with that dream, because it's that sense of don't speak out, don't make waves, don't say anything that's controversial. And when I first started writing this book, I had to be, I became very aware of like, wow, my other books aren't like this. Like I have not shared this part of who I am with the world. Little, with my girlfriends and with my guy friends or family, because there's a lot of experiences here, and other spiritual people that have shared their incredible experiences of this. Sage Dyer and, Marceline, were both have had, these visits from Wayne after he passed. Very, very clear what feels like a dream, but it's like he's really there, and they're touching him and they're talking to him. And, so I think there's so much more than this 3D reality, that we might not have readily, like these readily answers for. And when you go talk about quantum physics, that's just it, right? Energy never dies, it's never born, it just continues to transform and change shape.
Yeah.
And we are that.
Well, that's the thing, right? I think the phenomena is what really fascinates me, the experience of that, whether it's in a dream state or if it's in hypnotic states, regression states. Like you're experiencing some type of phenomena, and it's your interpretation of all your life experiences. Your reasoning from that. Jung says you're basically painting that picture from your all your experiences, your color, the kaleidoscope almost. Like you're interpreting all the shapes and the geometry from that, from like your personal like experiences in this life, and you're coloring that. So when we have regressions or we have dreams, you have this vision, and how you interpret it is who you are, your persona almost. And it's
Yep.
always fascinating me because when we leave the body, when we exit this place and we go to wherever we go next, like I wonder if like what is that phenomena we're experiencing then, and like do you carry over the personas, like judgments, preconceptions of like death anyway? Like the Buddhists talk about dying a conscious death. Like what does that look like? Do I have to wholeheartedly concentrate on the death process, going through the tunnel to the white light, in order to get to the other side, to exit the reincarnation trap or whatever they call it. Because like that doesn't make sense to me, because there's so many near death experiences where all of a sudden they pass over and they end up somewhere, and they're having an experience with spiritual beings, and they're told they have to come back, and it's like, boom, now you're back. So I wonder, I don't know, we're talking about death here. These are just some of my curiosities, and I don't know if you've experienced any, spiritual teachers that talk about this, but like, what is the importance of like focusing and being conscious during death? Have you ever had any conversations wrapped around that, to why, maybe that is the exit strategy for reincarnation? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I haven't had a lot of conversations about that exact thing, and particularly about, like, oh, we need to remain conscious as we're going through death. Um,
Yeah, because
I
they do
yeah.
chants and mantras. Like some of the Buddhist monks will do chants and mantras as they pass through, I guess, that threshold. But for me, it's like, for what reason? Like, why do they put so much emphasis on that? Because I don't know, maybe I don't know what happens on the other side, right? Like, I don't know. I'm down this rabbit hole right now of just like, what is it that we're experiencing? Because so many people are talking about right now, just like the UFO phenomena, UAP phenomena, and I've read a bunch of philosophy on, on the Bible texts, and maybe some of that phenomena is related to that phenomena. And it's like, well, what is the maybe it's just consciousness giving us, even dream states. What is it that is giving us, like, how are we interpreting that story? Like, why are we interpreting it that in that way? Like, how do we get the truth of what is being presented to us instead of someone else's interpretation of that? The archetypes that Jung talks about, there are these 12 different archetypes, but they show themselves differently to each individual. And the stories that we get are different. Like, the if someone sees an accident, three other people will describe that accident totally different than the one witness that is being used for whatever report, right? So that's always been fascinating to me. Like, the bell curve, like, why are so many people experiencing near death experiences this certain way? And then you have the outliers that experience it in totally different ways. Like, what is the truth? I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, what comes to mind is, have you seen What Dreams May Come?
No.
Oh my god, you gotta see it, Trey. It's, this film is so phenomenal, and to me, it depicts this, what you're speaking of so beautifully. And what it's talking about is that how we are imagining death to be, or afterlife to be, that's what we create in the afterlife. And I
Really?
just think that's such a fascinating concept to think about. Like, if my concept of death is, I leave here and, I end up at this place and everybody's having a big party, and I walk in and I get to see all the people that have passed before me, maybe that is what I experience. So it's fascinating. Like, if when you're talking about these Buddhist monks and people that they've been enculturated, they've believed this, this is what you could say their brain has been conditioned to believe through all the teachings, through all their education, through all their spirituality. And so is that then what they create as they leave? Because they have such a strong belief, and that is what it's going to be like on
Mm,
the other side. So I
that's
find
fascinating.
that fascinating. There's this scene where Robin Williams, he's literally gone to the other side, and he's like stepping in. It's such a great scene. Huge things of paint. Like, he is in a painted canvas and these huge things of paint. And his guide is Cuba Gooding Jr. Cuba is like the guardian angel, I guess. And he's like, you've created all of this. This is your creation. You can change it. And it's so interestingly, in that um, film, his wife has committed suicide, and she's in this just like abyss and being tortured. And some of it's because she believes it. She believes that's what her punishment should be. So it's fascinating, and I'm not saying that that's 100% of my belief system, but I do think there's something interesting about that. And for almost 5 years, I meditated with this group out of Seattle, and it was during the pandemic, and so we were online. And our teacher, who is this beautiful, incredible teacher, would tell us as we were doing these meditations that we were really doing this thing so that we could just continue to go as high as we could go, basically, is how she would describe it. Connect up as high as we can. Because she said part of it is when we die, we want to keep our souls going up, 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 and you don't want to get caught. And I didn't think of it as, like you said, this reincarnation loop. She never said that. But it was like, she's like, you want to go up as high as you can. Even if you see relatives or you see something, keep going as high as you can, and then you can come back. But I thought
Really?
that was
During death?
fascinating.
During death, she's talking about that?
Yeah, yeah, like once you pass that as you start to move towards the light, that you just keep going up as high as you can. And
Really?
that was just what she was teaching us. Like that was part of the practice, is how high up in your column you can connect.
Really? So go past your family members, keep going as high as you can. Maybe I don't know. Maybe this is a loop, a feedback, a closed loop of, coming back in, and then for some whatever reason, our belief systems keep us keep coming back to this place. What if the lesson is to realize that you are this conscious creator being, like that you are equal to that of what religions term as God,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I love that. That you're not separate then. It's I really do love the analogy of, like, if we compare, let's say, use the word God, the divine, as the ocean, I would be the biggest, sociopath or, narcissist if I walked around going, I'm the ocean. I'm the ocean, everybody. I mean, that's not reality. However, if I say, I'm one of the drops in the ocean, so I am in the body of God. So we each are one of those trillions of cells in the body of God, and that is what is within us. To me, that's what makes sense, that we're not separate than that, that we are that. And I think I love what you're saying, because obviously, of course, I don't know the answers. I only know through my experience what's informing my truth, my inner truth. And so I love when you say that, because maybe that's part of when we got out of the loop, right? I had a healer and a psychic that I had worked with once, and he said to me, you don't have to keep coming back. He said, your spirit loves it here so much, you keep choosing to come back, because you love this world and you want to help so much. There's so much that you're invested in giving to this world. And that's interesting. When I hear you say that, it's like, oh, what if we did realize that it's a choice? You're
Yeah.
talking about agency. What if part of our biggest free will is, it's okay for me to transcend and go as high as possible, and to realize, to truly actualize, as you were saying in the beginning with Maslow's hierarchy, that pure oneness. We get glimpses of it. We get the, tastes of that, I think, in this world. And that, it's like, to actually exist in that state, how fascinating, how incredible. Yeah, the possibilities for us, I really believe, are endless. So,
Yeah, I wonder if we can maintain that state, like because we are human beings, we have that animalistic brain, that limbic brain,
mhm.
and we have animalistic cravings, that are associated with the lower chakra systems, survival, sex, and anger, fear, all the things. And I think death influences a lot of our behaviors too, like the anxiety of death lurking. So we have fear of missing out. So people
Mhm.
have this neuroses of like, I have to get these things done, which, if time is an illusion, I think that can relieve a lot of that anxiety and stress because it's essentially, if there is reincarnation, I balk at this as I say this. It's like, well, then if you have eternity to get done what you want to get done, then you should relax more. But then we don't remember our purpose to begin with. So it's like you just keep coming back, and it's like you have this. I don't know. You keep forgetting everything that you've accumulated, all the knowledge up to this point. Like I've had people, astrologers say, "Well, Trey, looking at your birth chart, you've already been these X, Y, and Z," and it's like, well, I don't remember that. Like I don't remember that at all. But then there's the flip side of that argument. Like, what if I was Jack the Ripper in the last life? Would I want to remember that? I want to remember the monk life and what it was like to achieve enlightenment, but all the bad, you got to accept the good with the bad. And I don't know if I want to accept the bad, because I don't want to look at myself as being, capable of doing horrendous things in humanity. But if reincarnation is a thing, there's a high probability that I was doing those things. Um, so it's a good thing that my memories are blocked, because think about all the people that you've ever lost, in those lives, to your point about being drowned in the water for speaking out. That could have been a possible life, or it could have been the unconscious showing you, your fears in this life. I had a dream last night about an alligator biting my toe in the water. Like, it was this baby alligator nibbling at my toe. And it's like, I look at the unconscious as the water. What is it really trying to tell me? What anxieties or fears that I'm not looking at, that are reptilians. Maybe I'm afraid of the reptilian race. I don't know. Right. It's the fun of
Yeah.
the unconscious. It's like, use your intuition to, like, decipher the meanings for yourself. I mean, this is like the book of Job almost. You talk about Wayne Dyer, he had that nighttime meditation where he talks about God whispering, his messages to you as you fall asleep. And it's like dream states, like, how important are they? But how often do we overlook our dreams, or we don't remember our dreams? We don't really take them for, as guidance, because sometimes they're very hard to interpret. But it's just another message for you to help you in this life, on this path. Like, we are so, I'm in a weird space right now, because it's like, I'm so all about being spiritual, but I also have to remember to have a human experience, to where I'm not looking forward to death. It's like, all right, well, when I'm death, I will know it all. Like, I don't know that. Like, I could pause, maybe keep this same awareness and still be confused when I go somewhere, or wherever that is. But for right now, like, I am in a being state where I'm experiencing this something, this conversation, this reality. Like, I wake up and I could be in a non-being state. Like, I could be in the void where I experience nothing, just voidness, and, like, just have this despair. But now I've been so lucky to wake up and take a breath and be in this moment and actually find gratitude for that, if any of that makes sense.
It does. I mean, there's so many things again that you're speaking to that really resonate with me, and I want to speak to the part where you're speaking about, we are hardwired, right, to survive. The reptilian brain, or the primitive brain in us, is the part that's trying to keep us alive. So yes, I mean, talk about being anchored in this 3D reality. That's it. And I mean, you really hit it talking about, if we can, what I call befriend death, as just being part of this birth, death, birth cycle that we're in, and not as the final chapter. If we can start befriending that, then I think we really do, we stop clinging, and we stop that pressure that's like, oh my God, I got to get all this stuff done before I die. And I got to, and we can befriend then and make life more sacred. Like, this moment becomes so much more sacred. I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to keep this, it's like that whole thing, like, there's something on my shoulder saying, oh my God, this could end, this could end. Okay. What if we made peace with that? What if we made peace with that? And then our life is more sacred, because it's
Sure.
like, I am showing up fully to this moment. I don't have that fear always looming. And I think also, gosh, there was something else you were saying that was really hitting me. It's escaping me right now. You had so much that you were
I know,
sharing right
I
then.
do
That
that.
was so
That's the one
good.
thing. That's the one thing about, like, these online platforms. Like, when you speak to someone, like, it's not like a regular conversation. Like, you have to do your rant before the next person speaks, because, like, the audio, like, kind of overpowers one another. Um, but what I wanted to say, and I'm losing my train of thought. We're in that consciousness now where it's escaping us. I think for us, and being in the moment, and just what are your desires? Like, that's, you talk about anxiety and fear of death because we don't have enough time. But, like, what are your desires? Like, and I'm reading, what was this? Gospel of Thomas
Oh
today
yeah.
before we
Yep.
started.
Nice.
Um, and it talks about let me find this one. On the day when you are naked, a newborn, on the day when you are naked as newborn infants who trample their clothing, then you will see the Son of the Living One. So to me, that's like unprogramming. We talk about our desires. We talk about all the things we must achieve before we hit death. But how much of that is conditioning from societal cultures, enculturation, um, from others outside of us, externals? And that what is driving you? Is it really you? Like, is it really you that is driving you towards those goals, or is it someone else? And that's what I really love about existential therapists and philosophy and psychology is, are you lying to yourself about who you are? Are you having neurosis about fear of death because of all the goals you haven't achieved? But is it your dad's goals? Is it your mom's goals? Is it your culture's goals? Like, who's saying you need to have these things? And in that statement, it's like, are you naked like a newborn baby? Are you a clean slate? Can you die a clean slate? That's where I'm at.
Well, and our last conversation when we were talking about the new book by Paul Selig, A World Made New. And I just feel like the beginning of that book is so much about I'm like, this is psychology. I mean, literally, he's talking about what you're speaking to, which is dismantling all that past programming, whether it was from our parents, schools, church, whatever that was that informed who we saw ourselves as and defined ourselves as and said, oh, this is how I need to show up in the world. This is my, as Don Miguel Ruiz would say, this was our domesticated self, that we were really, wild spirits. And then we come into this reality and we are tamed, we are domesticated. Um, and so I think that's part of this powerful spiritual journey that we're on. And in saying that too, one of the things I was going to speak to that you were saying before is we don't want to do the spiritual bypass though. We don't want to be like, oh, I'm not going to deal with, these negative feelings I have coming up or this negative experience because I just want to be this enlightened being. I think it's important that we really get that we can embrace all of it, and that's one of the chapters of my book is about dealing with grief and growing through grief. It's not about pushing those negative experiences down. And to speak to that too, when you were saying like, okay, what if we were this horrible person in a past life? I remember, conversations with my father. This is like 25 years ago. And he would say, my father was an incredible spiritual seeker as well. And so we'd have these deep conversations and he'd say, the truth is we all have an Adolf Hitler and a Mother Teresa inside of us. We're all capable of doing incredible, beautiful things in this world and horrific things. And so it kind of reminds me of, the story of the wolves, like which wolf are you going to feed? Which part of us do we want to feed? And I think when we embrace that we are all of it, we embrace the dark thoughts. We embrace, as Rumi says in his poem, The Guest House, it's welcoming whatever shows up at your front door. A meanness, a depression, sorrow comes. And so welcome them all. I think that's part of our spiritual journey as well, is to be with what shows up here, what shows up in this experience, not trying to get around it. And as we hold it and we befriend those parts of ourselves, we actually can, that's, I think, how some of the true healing actually happens. And we can start to decondition ourselves when we see what those wounds or that pain comes from. And realize too, the spiritual aspect of that is we're not just that. We're not just that. And we can let go of the wounded self. We can let go of, and when I say wounded self, I'm mainly thinking of wounded ego self. We can
Do you
let
think the
go of
spirit,
that.
the spark, can be wounded though? Do you think that's wounded at all?
No, no. And if what I was saying was saying that, that's not at all. I when I say wounded self, it's the parts of us that are
No, no,
wounded
no. You
through our
said the ego
lives, right?
self is wounded, but I wonder if the spark can be wounded because it is encapsulated by the ego or the body.
No,
Like, does
I
it always
don't
stay
think it
pure?
is. For me, I think that I experience it as that divine light. It's that part of us that remembers that we are that. And so it's continually like we have this urge to seek something more, something greater, but it's actually within us.
Do you think it's a
That's the
seed?
interesting thing.
Seed, like it's very similar to the seed and planting it in the ground. That you have to like we don't we think we're bodies, right, and personas. And you talk about the divine spark, which is inside of us. Like, how do you cultivate or how do you magnify that light? Right, like we are
Yeah.
totally blind to it until we're not, and we have an experience of it. But how do you cultivate a brighter light?
Well, it's interesting. I feel like I keep dating myself here, but this was probably again, maybe 20 years ago, but I went to a Sufi school in San Francisco. And the Sufis believe that to get to that light, to that spark, it's the lifting of the veils. That's what they would say. And the practice that they do with prayer beads, the meditation is called the remembrance. So it's remembering that which already is within us, that divine
Hmm.
spark. And so I think it's always there, it's always illuminated. But for me, how I experience it and how I speak to it is that we have circumstances and situations in our life that cover it up, and so we have to, our work is how do we excavate it? It's always shining, it's always so bright. And maybe you've seen it even with your children, when kids are really little, they have access to it. They are not living in the already conditioned mind, so you see it so much more often. I have so many stories of people sharing these kind of experiences with their kids. Wayne Dyer's last book was called Memories of Heaven,
Hmm.
and it was thousands of letters from all over the world, people sharing these experiences where their little kids would say, "Oh, I got shot right here before I came here. I was like a German soldier," and then they'll literally have a birthmark, although, or they'll have something that's indicative of that, or they look at a picture and go, "Oh, I love Uncle John. He's so great." And like Uncle John was dead so long before this kiddo ever came, and so there's
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of these stories. So I guess that's, to your point, I guess I just feel like, yeah, our light continues. Our light, it's like it's born within us. Again, it never dies. And quantum physics, again, is proving this. I mean, it has proven this. So this isn't just this woo-woo conversation. I mean, there's really some
Sure.
hard science behind
There
this,
is. I think UVA has their own department, right? I think it's the Department of Perceptual Studies or something similar to that, where they had reincarnation studies. Um, I'm forgetting his name. Maybe Dr. Ian Stevenson has a lot of
Mm,
evidence towards children and reincarnation, and so to me, it is scientifically backed, in my opinion. Transmigration is a thing, which leads me to wonder, why do we keep coming back? Or maybe is it just I don't know. I just love it's the mystery, the mystery that it's always just so fascinating to me. Like there's so many like as an interviewer, and I know you have experienced this, everyone has their own interpretations of spirituality and why we're here. Like there's maybe some commonalities, like we're all connected, um, the universe is mind, all these things, near death experiences, we keep coming back, reincarnation. There's commonalities, but in between those, everyone has a different interpretation of what consciousness is. You have Tom Campbell that says this is a virtual reality and that we are evolving. We're trying to reduce the entropy of our own entropy as what does he call it? Individual units of consciousness. And then you have some that call this a soul trap, that we're stuck here and we keep, you know what I mean? Like there's so many different
yeah.
loose interpretations. I shouldn't say loose, but there are different interpretations of what we're doing here. My fascination is, but there's also tools that we can use to find our own truth, like Dr. David Hawkins and muscle testing.
Hmm.
Like, testing. I use my 6-year-old daughter. It's pretty funny. She actually loves it. Like I'll tell her to put her arm out and I'll muscle test people, different authors, to see what levels of consciousness they are. It isn't a tried and true system yet because of her, and that I don't, she loves it and she's laughing. So I don't know which one's strong and weak, but there are methods that we can find for ourselves that we resonate with. How do you find, like, your own tools? Like, how do you know when a teaching for you is true as opposed to something that doesn't feel right, that may not be at that higher level of consciousness?
Yeah. When I'm speaking with someone, what I get is what I call truth bumps. I mean, I will get the chills. And sometimes when I have met really highly, I don't want to say highly evolved, that sounds silly, but like people that are really living in a very high frequency, high vibe, have really let go of a lot of what we're talking about, like the denser energies. Um, I'll have those experiences with them where like I just keep getting the chills during the conversation. And sometimes so much though, I'm very kinesthetic. So sometimes I'm literally like, oh my God, this is embarrassing because like my body starts shaking. Because the truth of what they're speaking to is so profound. So that's when I know it's like that bigger, really, really incredible truth. And I have to tell you, the end of the book, um, one of the things I write about is the most profound dream that I had, and it was about a year ago, a little over a year ago. Um, and it was literally like I was being shown all these answers. And one of the answers, if you will, that just, again, this stuff to me was just like through my being like complete truth. Like there was no question for me. And really what it was talking about is that how that light that is us, when it chooses to come here, it really chooses. And the joke of all of it was that it is just one body, but we come here like as these individual cells to experience ourself, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. And so then as we're here, we've already signed up for this duality of experience. So we're not signing up for heaven. We're not signing up for something that's just going to be bliss. So we're saying I want to experience the duality. And then what I was shown in this dream was like it's almost like we come in and we've got these preset alarms. And it might be for us, they show up as like a disaster or a crisis in our life. And so, what those are, they're actually opportunities for us to wake up. And we can choose to push the snooze button and not awaken. Or we can look at that because it's a glimpse, it's going to show us something that was supposed to be, oftentimes people go through something that's really horrific or something that, a cancer journey or losing someone. And it's this wake up call for their spirit. It's this wake up call, not that their spirit's asleep, but it's the uncovering, right? It's the uncovering of like, oh my gosh, there's something more here. And you'll hear people all of a sudden, they're like, well, I started taking an acting class and I started donating time and I started doing these things after this happened. And so in the dream, it was just saying like all of that is preset. Like we've already done
Hmm.
that. We've already, that's like our soul saying, okay, you're going to have this experience and I'm going to give you opportunities to either continue to awaken or you can stay asleep. That's fine. We can
Sure.
snooze through it.
Yeah. I love that. I think another aspect of that is like waking up and then not being able to live here either because you're seeing the truth and you're seeing the matrix where it's for what it is. I mean, again, and I hate to keep going back to the Gospel of Thomas, but he says like you're essentially going to have an existential shock once you see the truth. And it's many near death experiencers have said that they have a hard time being here because they've already experienced that joy. Whoever searches must continue to search until they find. When they find, they will be disturbed, and being disturbed, they will marvel. And so, have you ever supported anyone that's had like a peak experience that had had some trouble coming back and reintegrating into society?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's great because being eclectic and being also, an existential therapist, it's so awesome because you get to dive deep with people and go into, you get to hang out in the interiors of their hearts. And it's just, for me, one of the most honored experiences I can imagine. And I definitely have had people that have had those peak experiences and then they're like chasing it, like chasing it for the next 20, 30 years. And so I think it's important that it's not chasing it. It's just opening up. Like I think about Pema Chödrön, who's an incredible American Buddhist nun. And one of the things she talks about is, I love her because she's like, you show up for your meditation. You show up for your sit. And these are her words. She said, sometimes it's a shitty meditation. That's okay. You just keep
Yeah.
showing up. And so, and it's that Buddhist principle of showing up each day with a child's mind and not having to be the expert on it. And I think that's the gift. As we continue to bring ourselves present, we show up in this moment, and then we allow whatever the sacredness of this moment is to come through. And to me, that's as close as we can get. It's like we can create, quote unquote, heaven on earth. And I think heaven or hell really exists between our two ears. I don't think it's a place that we go to. Because
Hmm.
as we get trapped in some, habitual thought loops, we create our own hell.
Sure.
We start feeling horrific. So, um, you're talking about going to just this ecstatic place and then having a hard time coming back. I think part of it is to keep practicing just being in the moment, because I think there is ecstasy in this moment. I think we can achieve peak states in this moment. Um,
Hmm.
and it really is, to me, it's an internal search. At that same Sufi school, I had our teacher, Dr. Jaffe, say to me, um, in a crowd full of people, after he had shook my hand as I walked in. I did feel like he was like peering into my soul. Um, he says, here's this crowd of people. He's up on stage and he stops and he's like, "Hey, you in the blue coat, I have a message for you." And I'm looking around. I'm like, oh crap, I'm the one in the blue coat. And he says this message, and I can't hear him. And he says it again, and I still can't hear him. And people start laughing. And he's like, "My dear, you have some resistance to this." And he says, "What I'm trying to tell you is," and as he tries to tell me the third time, all the air conditioning units in the place come on and nobody can hear him. So then, like, everybody's laughing, and he's like, "Okay, my dear, come up here, come up here." And I go up and I sit by him. And he's like, "What is so difficult for you to hear is stop trying. Stop trying." And without knowing me, he said, "Your whole life you've been trying to be perfect for your father, and now you're trying to be perfect for your husband. Stop trying." And it was like this pivotal point in my life, because I thought all the wisdom, all the happiness, everything was outside of me. And if I just did all these things right, then I would be happy. Then I would love myself. Then I would, be okay. And the truth was, it's all an inside job.
Mm.
And discovering our divinity, while all these books and texts and teachers are incredible, what I have heard from so many spiritual people in the past few years is the time of the guru and the time of the shaman are over. And not that we don't need those people, they're still valuable and honorable. And I adore, I'm friends with so many, incredible spiritual people in the world, but we have to go within, that our greatest teacher and all the wisdom, all the beauty, all the strength that we're seeking, they're actually right there inside of us.
It's as easy as that. Wow. Stephanie, this has been an amazing conversation. I think you dropped some very valuable nuggets for the audience. How can people buy your new book? How can they reach out to you?
Sure, thank you. They can buy my new book. It's available on Amazon. So it's Your Big Fat Juicy Life and Everything After. And my website is stephaniejames.world. And people can find my other books. I have a free gift for people, which is this beautiful chakra meditation, guided meditation. And they can see the trailer to my film that's playing right now on Humanity Stream, When Sparks Ignite.
Busy, busy lady, Stephanie. I can't thank you
Indeed.
enough for hanging out with me today.
It's been a joy. It always is. Thank you, Trey. Thanks for having me.